All right. Well, good afternoon to everybody. Hope everybody's having a good day and everybody had a good weekend. Hopefully some of you were able to have a 3-day weekend and appreciated the extra time. We have, I think, 60 plus people on today, which is really, I think, good numbers. Just, this is going to be kind of an open forum. We have Brad Banasic and Jen Smith along with myself today to kind of just do a round robin. What are the hot topics you're interested in? I'm going to touch on a couple of things to get us started and maybe get your conversational juices going. But, this is an opportunity for board members and soups to kind of ask the experts. And I consider Brad and Jen experts. I'm just the facilitator of this conversation. So the two things I wanted to touch on, and for those that get the Detroit news, you might have seen maybe, I want to say for about a week and a half ago, the Detroit News did an editorial really going after a couple of our members and MASB on equity work. It was an editorial really, kind of cloaked in the conversation regarding critical race theory, and kind of said that it's alive and well in Michigan, and used Farmington's Board of Education as an example. And they had offered voluntarily to their students to do the 21-day equity challenge. I don't know if you're familiar with it. I've seen it on Facebook over the last couple of years. United Way of Southeastern Michigan and a lot of United Ways across the country offered it as a thing for people to do, just to learn and be exposed. So on a voluntary basis, Farmington did it. I know other districts that have done it. The news kind of took them to task for that. And then they looked at our September issue of our Leaderboard magazine that you all received. If you remember it, there was a group of kids on the front page, and the whole issue was really dealing with all of the types of diversity that you as school board members and school districts deal with. It wasn't an issue related to racial diversity. It was just about diversity and how we deal with those kids. And frankly, the parents, and, in any case. And they took the titles of two of our articles and threw them into the editorial, and pulled a quote out of one of them. And I just thought it was an unfair look at the equity work that either the districts are doing in Michigan or what MASB was doing, and felt that after seeing it, that we needed to respond on behalf of our members and on behalf of MASB. So because it was a response to an editorial, it goes into the letter to the editor space, but it is available in their online edition today, and it'll be in their print edition tomorrow. My apologies, the online edition, you can't see it unless you're a subscriber to it. But just know that, in this, I just felt it was needed when any newspaper is going to take on our broader membership, and particularly MASB, about work that's being done. And particularly when they do it in a way where I think a lot of things were taken out of context and weren't really telling the whole story. I felt that it was necessary for us to put out a response. We don't often do that. In this case, I just thought it was a necessary space to defend the work that districts are doing. And I think doing it cautiously. I don't see districts out there, going too far in the work that they're doing. You might have isolated incidences where a district or a teacher or a staff member says something, but that's not where the district governing board is. It's not where their superintendent is. And so wanted to let you know that it's out there, that we did that. Feel free to take a look at it. And I think it's a good conversations that school district needs to stay in. And before, I didn't do this right at the beginning. It's School Board Appreciation Month. in January. So first off, I have to say thank you to all of you from MASB for the work that you do. And nobody didn't remind me. I just remembered it by chance. And just, I know it's been a horrible 2 years to be a board member. And, at least from MASB's staff perspective and our board of directors, but from staff especially, we really respect the work that you do. Thank you so much for the work that you do in your districts. And hope that you have a good January, and hopefully your districts have done something to recognize the work that you do as board members. So sorry I missed that on the front end. The last thing I'll mention before we get into just kind of a conversation with Brad and Jen and I and you guys is we are in an election year, January 2022, and not that I don't care about the governor's election and House and Senate and Congress, but I most care about the membership of MASB and all of you that are in elections or have elections on your board. I think this is going to be a year like we have not seen recently. If you get the upcoming issue of Leaderboard, and my introduction letter to that issue talks about the elections for this year. And a lot of other states have elections in the odd year, so November of 2021. And as I've talked to my colleagues from around the country, they saw greater involvement in school board elections that they've ever seen, more people running than they've seen, more money being spent in elections, actual political action committees, locally and nationally, coming into school board elections. I do not think that Michigan's going to be immune from that space. I do think we're gonna have that kind of involvement. And what we will do as MSB, we're going to continue our Get On Board campaign and have resources on our website to help all of you kind of figure out how to attract candidates and do things. But I wanted to let you know a couple of things from MASB's kind of overarching kind of perspective right now. We've been contacted by a number of groups, both late last year and even in January, about coming out and having somebody from MASB staff to come out and do work, and or tell a group what it means to be a board member and things along those lines. And we've been contacted, depending on the county, by both political parties and their county parties to do that. We've been contacted by just special interests that are interested in having that view, kind of what do we see as a school board. One, as the increase come in, I think that we would have a hard time keeping up with them from a staff perspective, and traveling around the state. And a lot of these groups are quite small, so it's also going out and speaking to 6 people. But we will be in the kind of March and April space, doing some virtual meetings that anybody that you have that is interested in running or is running for a board would be able to participate in. And we will have staff as a part of those talking about what it means to be a board member. We will share that information with all of our membership, so we will be able to direct people that way. We'll actually get probably a better cross section of people, because we'll be, you can come in from anywhere in the state and ask questions and have conversations. So I think we're going to handle those responses by pointing them in the direction of those virtual opportunities. And as it relates to the political parties that have made requests, we are a 501c3. We can't be involved in candidates per se, like in an endorsement space. And although Brad might say, yeah, we could do a presentation to a party about what it means to be a school board member, really, we would say that we are I would say I and the board are uncomfortable providing that to either party. We do not want to be seen as a partisan organization. We work really hard. Jen works hard at the Capitol, not being seen that way. And as much as I'd like to educate them, I'd prefer that they weren't taking part in candidate training. I really don't like DNR next to a school board member name. I know all of you individually have your own political affiliation, and that's completely fine. And I think most of you would say, maybe not in the last couple of years, but prior to that, it was rare that political issues ever got to the board table. And man, I would like it to stay that way. I know that I'm probably, it's not going to stay that way in some of our districts in the upcoming election cycle. But just so you know where MASB is coming from, we are trying to steer clear of that conversation. I see a question there, Catherine. Does MASB partner with Action Network in Michigan and their campaign to train possible school board candidates? Their title is Michigan Healthy and Healing Schools. Catherine, we've actually not had a specific request from them, but they are similar to some of the other groups that have reached out and asked us if we could do some things. And what I've done is also point them in the direction of letting their members and those that are participating in their membership or interested in running to also check our Get On Board page. So when we start posting the meetings, they can invite their membership to participate and let them know about our webinars that we'll have out there. And it just, I think, is going to be, it will serve us better to approach it in that manner. I spoke with a school district last week, maybe it was early last week. And what I had a group from a district contact me, so I reached out to the district. And of course, what we don't want to have is the first interaction that a person has with MASB to be watching from I'll say from across the street as MASB provides information to one group that they may not be a part of. And if they would have requested, maybe we'd have done the same thing, but it looks like MASB is immediately taking sides in local elections based on the groups that we're trying to educate. And we just can't afford as an organization to go down that road. We can't afford to have people that get elected to your local boards think something of MASB before they even get to know who we are. I mean, some will do that. They'll have they'll have their thoughts of whatever it is for MASB for other reasons, but I don't want to be in a place where we are the ones that cause the reason, even if it is misconstruing us being involved or whatnot. So I encourage all of you, if you talk to groups, if you talk to people that are interested, point them in a direction, let them know that we will have opportunities for people to participate from your communities, to learn and know what it means to be a board member and know what it means to run and what they have to do. Brad does work in that space. So just know this is going to be an interesting year. One thing, Brad had a call, and over the years, we've had these kind of questions. The question is, how does a board or a superintendent go about recruiting candidates? Or even the next step, which would be endorsing candidates. So one, I would say from a board perspective and from a superintendent perspective, that even though there might be some wiggle room, I think we would encourage you to not endorse candidates or slates of candidates. I think that's very dangerous. If that slate or that candidate that you were behind doesn't win, and now you have to have on the board their opponent, it just sets up a relationship problem from the very beginning, and it's probably not needed. On the flip side of that, in the recruitment space, if your board looks at you have somebody leaving the board, and what are we losing when that person leaves the board? What would we like to see on our board coming forward? And we think about it from a descriptive standpoint, this skill set, this mindset, and you want to go to your Rotary and Lions Club and PTAs and say, here's what we're looking for. That's completely fine. In fact, we encourage you to do that. And of course, privately, as individual board members, as superintendents, if you have conversations with somebody and say, hey, I think you should think about running for our board. I think you would fit what would do well on our board. That's not problematic either. I think it's risky to be in a public space where you are taking a stand as a soup or a board member for or against, one person or a group of people. You get to do what you want, but it is one of those things where we just have to tell you to be very cautious as you think about that board relationship. I see a couple of questions. Stan, any chance of moving school board elections back to odd number years? Jen's shaking her head no. Before she did that, I would have probably said no. It would be really nice if Michigan, if we could go to the odd November and not be in the bottom of a ballot that's pages long. But what we're seeing, we just had a question go through a listserv that Jen and I are both on nationally, where more states are looking at a model like ours to go in that direction. So I don't think we're going to be going backwards anytime soon. Stacy, thanks very much for posting the town hall meeting timeframe and the candidate guide that we've got forward. So I've done enough talking. Let's open it up for you to raise your hands. Questions on the couple of topics I covered, questions for Brad and Jen on budget information, which I know they released some of last week, questions related to the president's masking, testing, vaccination order that was dealt with by the U.S. Supreme Court. We are open to whatever. You can post questions, you can raise hands, whatever you would like to do to have a conversation. Jeff, I see your hand is up.
Thanks, Don. I just want to touch base and add to your comment about superintendents and potential board members. I actually, my practice is once the slate of candidates have been announced, I call each of the candidates and take them to coffee. This is back when you could do this and meet them personally, because each person potentially is going to be on the board working with me. And I want to begin fostering a positive relationship right away. And if they don't get elected, then I end up having a nice conversation and promoting the district's programs to an interested party in the community about schools. So I actually have not had the opportunity to get involved and say, you ought to run or you ought to run. I take a very neutral stance. And once someone has declared, then I begin to recruit them and help them to, I get to connect with them. What is it, your vision for being on the board while you're running? And then begin to interact with them in that way. So that's just what I do.
I appreciate you sharing that, Jeff. I have a follow-up because others may be thinking this. So if you have an incumbent running and you have others running against that incumbent, do you still do the coffee with the other people running just to get to know them?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
okay.
Because I've had an incumbent that was defeated. So I did that exactly. That scenario played out here in my district.
Okay, good. Linda had her hand up, and then we'll go to Stan after Linda.
Grand Rising, everybody. Thank you for this opportunity to speak with everyone. I'm a school board member, elected 2014. So I'm the oldest member in the group. However, we in Highland Park, we have a very unique situation. I need some clarity, if at all possible. We have an administration that we're having a lot of difficulty with. And when we have school board meetings, the president, who is now since July, will cut off members. Now, is that against the Open Meeting Violation Act? She says that she's trying to do this for time, but my understanding is that a board member can talk as long as they need to get their point across. And it seems like it's a bit of censorship that's going on.
Well, Linda, I'm going to have Brad address that specifically, and I'll have him do it in a kind of a short format, and then you might end up taking a conversation with Brad offline in the future, but I'll let Brad take a stab at it right now.
Okay, thank you.
So, yeah, the board has, elected that individual to serve as chair, president, of your meetings, and that individual, does have amount of authority to control the proceedings of that meeting. Now, majority always rules, though, right? So if you have a chair that is cutting folks off and you believe it's not appropriate, you can always do a point of order under Robert's Rules of Order. And with that point of order, you make the request, to the chair that, well, this item's on the agenda. I as a board member, I have a right to speak to this item. And, unless a call the question motion has been passed by a 2/3 vote, discussion and deliberation should still continue on this matter. And then if the chair doesn't recognize your point of order, then that can be put up to a vote of the board. And then the board votes on that matter of whether that individual board member, should be cut off. It's really not an Open Meetings Act issue. I don't see an Open Meetings Act violation there. It's more of a parliamentary matter. And ultimately, as I indicated, it's covered, under Robert's Rules of Order, and it's covered by, majority rules. Now, if you're cutting off a member of the public in terms of when they're addressing the board during public comment, then that's a completely different issue. When you're dealing with, the chair dealing with board members as compared to members of the public, that's when the Open Meetings Act is implicated. And you possibly could be violating a community member's rights under the Open Meetings Act, as well as their First Amendment rights, by cutting them off during public comment if you're not relying on a rule that allows you to stop the public comment.
Question, please, just to ask a question. So when the board members are speaking and the president is biased to certain members, you said by a vote, you said majority and not a 2/3 vote, is that correct?
Well, a point of order, would be substantiated by a majority vote. So if you feel that you're being unfairly cut off by the board chair, you can raise a point of order under Robert's Rules of Order or parliamentary procedure, and that's essentially making a demand to the chair that you're violating parliamentary procedure by not allowing me to speak when there hasn't been a call the question motion passed, which ends debate.
Right.
And then if the chair doesn't grant your request, then you can appeal that to the board in total, and then they would vote on whether the chair acted contrary to parliamentary procedure in cutting off the board member.
Brad,
Thank you. Please, I'm sorry.
is that on a specific, the way you laid that out on cutting off debate, is that on a specific agenda item where you would go down that road, or could it be done at any time where a board member just says, I'd like to speak to an issue that's not on the agenda, maybe?
Well, I advise chairs, presidents to run a meeting with the agenda. I mean, that's why you have an agenda. And if a board member wishes to speak to an item that's not related to the agenda, then you need to amend that by a majority vote. And then, that discussion would be in order once the agenda is amended by a majority vote and that issue is added to the agenda, allowing a board member to discuss that matter. So it would be appropriate if you had a board member wanting to comment on a topic that's not on the agenda and the chair rules that out of order, because the chair is just simply following the agenda and facilitating the meeting.
If I may, I have one more question, please. What about agendas? Now, is it appropriate to have agendas 5 days before the meeting? Because sometimes we get agendas on the same day, and that's not enough time to study, what we need to discuss, especially when it's business meeting, we have an agenda first, but we don't get it until maybe that day of. Now, is that appropriate?
Check your bylaws on that, Linda. Usually the bylaws will indicate when the boards, should receive an agenda, how many days before that meeting.
This has been happening constantly. It's supposed to be 5 days, but they always come up with excuses. We've got a lot of work to do here in Highland Park.
Yeah, Linda, and I would, just to save time for others, I would encourage you, because some of the things you're talking about move outside of the kind of legal questions that Brad have asked. And Debbie Stair in our office is our board development and leadership specialist in working with boards. She might be a good person to reach out to talk about kind of best practices on some of the things that you're bringing up here.
Could you please give me her contact information, maybe?
We'll put it in the chat for you.
Thank you.
Stan, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Don. I just wanted to follow up on the Comstock Park Superintendent and talking about new board members or new board candidates. That our superintendent does the same thing as he does, meets with every declared candidate, or at least offers to meet. Some of them don't take him up on it. But we as a board also have a fact sheet about the district that we send to every declared candidate for whom we can get contact information. And that's something that we actually got from the Alaska Association of School Boards through an MASB training course. So that's a great resource.
Thanks for bringing that up, Stan. I think that's a good idea as well. Brad,
Don.
Stan, Comstock and Kalamazoo, not Comstock Park. No problem. It happens all the time.
I beg your pardon. Sorry about that.
That's all right. Go Colts.
Brad, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I noticed the question of 4 or 6 year terms in the chat. If you click on our latest leaderboard, I actually did a point counterpoint article on 4 and 6 year terms. I tried to come up with all the pros and cons of 4 and 6 year terms, and as a prelude to that article, I discussed the process and the history behind being able to choose between 4 and 6 year terms. Essentially, you're amending your bylaws by moving either from 4 to 6 year terms or 6 to 4 year terms. And you're going to want to develop a transition plan, to try to get on the most type of, most balanced type of election cycle that you can. So if you transition to 6 year terms, you get on a 3-2-2 cycle. If you're going from 6 to 4, you maintain that 3 to 4 election cycle. So that's in the point counterpoint article. If anyone has any questions about transitioning from 4 to 6 or 6 to 4, feel free to give me a call. I've addressed that issue a number of times over the years.
Thanks for that, Brad. I was actually that was the question I was going to throw out to you. And the thing I would bring up in that space is what you hear often as you're trying to recruit candidates. Running for office, running for a 6 year term just seems like a long time. And so some people feel pretty reluctant to do so. Although interestingly, when you have an appointment at your district because somebody has stepped down from the board, you often end up with, and sometimes more candidates and maybe a higher quality of candidate that's interested in an appointment, but they just haven't been interested in running. And so we have seen districts that to try to, just maybe it's just by nature, but some I think have even planned it out where they know somebody is not going to run again, and to try to make sure they can attract people, they actually have that person step down, before that term is up, so that they can appoint to get somebody maybe that is interested, and then will run again after they've had the experience. But that's a mechanism I've seen some districts deal with in that place. Hal has a question. Of course, the Supreme Court has struck down the President Biden's order related to testing and vaccination for employers with more than 100 employees. But Hal asked, what can we do as districts to best encourage testing, vaccinating, masking? I mean, I think you said it in the question, Hal. It's an encouraged thing. If that's a direction that you as a district and a board want to go, largely you're talking about your employees in this space. So I think it would be in your best interest to have your superintendent have a conversation with your union leaders about how to best go about that conversation, so you don't, just get people angry when you're not trying to really be, when you're not trying to be in that space, you're trying to work collaboratively. So I think it's reaching out with your union leadership, figuring out how to best address that, approaching it as I'm imagining you would be in this case, in a safety concern space, and maybe jointly coming up with a message if you can get to that space. But that would be kind of how I might approach that situation. Nick, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. I was asking Jen privately, and I'd like to ask other boards that are on here. One of the items with reviewing finance committee stuff is the forecasted and current budget surplus in the school aid fund. And I know there are a lot of items on the school research finance collaborative that remain to be done. But, here in Rockford, having the foundation allowance brought whole for us met one of our largest lobbying goals. So the next one up on the list for us, our administration also agrees with me, would be for you guys to consider when we're doing the regional roundtables for our priorities for Jen and the team to work on, is to consider paying down MIPSers. I know for us, that unfunded liability that, the previous administration and the legislature took a great deal of heat to do to pay it off by 2038, I think, or 2035. I think it's 2038, 35. While that's laudable, I don't know that we'll ever have an opportunity to pay down MIPSers like we do now. And if you're unfamiliar with what that would do, it would actually free up more budget for us and for Lansing, to disperse in the school aid fund. I would just ask you to consider that as we put together our legislative agenda for the following years. And I just want to ask that question because, it feels like dreamland, sort of Wizard of Oz, when I saw the forecast out 3-4 years. It was just amazing. And I don't know that we will ever see it again in our lifetime. So just wanted to throw that out for something you guys to consider.
Jen, I can respond somewhat, but I'll let you go first.
So yeah, the numbers that came out of the Consensus Revenue Estimating Conference on Friday were crazy. One of them called it a metric crap ton of money. But we're looking at billions more than we expected. And so we are having those conversations. Where do we put the money? And let's put our stake in this before all the vendors do. Paying down MIPSers is definitely one of the things we've come up with. That would free up money in your everyday budgets. It affects everything you do by taking some of that money off the table. And gets us closer to getting rid of it completely. We know that the chair of the Appropriations Committee has been looking at MIPSers through the years and on what he can do to it. So maybe this is a spot where he can step up and help us. One of the other things we've talked about is increasing the state portion of your special ed reimbursements. We know both the state and the feds are not reimbursing you to the full promised amount. This may be an opportunity to do that. The one drawback is that there's a maintenance of effort. And so there is some hesitancy in initial conversations with the budget office to put a lot of money into special ed, because if these revenues fall off a cliff in a couple of years, we still have to put all that money into special ed. And how would that affect the rest of the budget? So it's just a piece that we'd have to work out. And one of the other pieces that we're talking about too, to free up money within the school aid budget, is the general fund is also looking at something like $1.5 billion extra dollars on the spreadsheet. So here's our opportunity to move higher ed out of school aid. And if we move just the universities out, that's $500 million. If we move everybody out, we're just over $1 billion. So those are some of the things that we've been talking about so far, big picture. We think we're going to start having more specific conversations in the coming weeks. Part of this has to settle down from the, oh my God, did you see all the money? To honestly, where is the money coming from? How much is a one-time source? How much is fed? What will be repeated? Things like that, as we look at the revenue streams. But we continue to see this uptick in revenue streams, especially in the sales and use tax, because people are still buying things and not experiences, not services, because people are still somewhat staying close to home. So we've reverted back to this economy we had back in the 90s, and our sales taxes are going through the roof. So we have to keep an eye on all those moving parts, but those are the three big buckets that we're talking about right now: MIPSers pay down, special ed, and getting higher ed out of the budget.
And I would only add in that to Nick, the Ed Alliance of Michigan, which is all of the education groups that you can think of. We actually had Anthony Estelle, the director of ORS, in a couple of months ago, just to talk about the situation, like where ORS is at, where MIPSers is at, to see, to have conversations about possible long-term solutions. So we've been thinking about MIPSers for a while, because as you know, right now, our obligation at the district, the obligation at the district level is capped. And so we just see the state and the school aid funding paying a larger and larger share of that. So, if there's a space to free up money, and compared to other things, I think MASB will be supportive of that. Of course, some of the one-time money, the federal money in particular, actually says that you can't spend it on that. So we have to look at the state revenue side of things for that. And of course, the other thing that Jen didn't mention, but we hear people talking about, is continuing to, you mentioned SFRC, but get the foundation base up to the level that SFRC called for, so that we can start funding the categorical side of SFRC as well. So, but as Jen mentioned, already retirement is one of those conversations, and we'll be having that well before our regional meetings of the fall when we're setting priorities. We want to be involved in this budget cycle, but thanks for that.
Yeah, if you have any closet accountants on your school board, you'll find them scrawling, and they'll say, oh my gosh, they could pay off the entire MIPSers thing and still give $600 per student. That's the amount of money we're talking about. And that's the sort of thing you just say, this is never going to happen again. Don't let the eyes get so wide. But, long term, having more funds in the school aid fund after this is gone, will simply make your lives and ours much better. Thanks for considering that as you meet Jen and the team in the regional meetings.
Other questions? Brad, I don't know if you or Jen have anything that you just would like to throw out there for things that you're hearing in your offices that is worth sharing. And
I guess I'm getting this question often, and I know there's still a little bit of confusion out there on virtual meetings. I just wanted to remind everyone, as of January 1st this year, your virtual meeting options are very, very limited. Essentially, you can only participate virtually if you get called away for military duty. So even if you're subject to a local state of emergency, even if you believe that having a virtual meeting is dangerous under the current COVID situation, you cannot have a virtual meeting under those circumstances. The Open Meetings Act only allows a virtual meeting to accommodate a member of the military, and that person has been called away for military duty. I know I've received requests from board members about amending the Open Meetings Act. Maybe Jen could comment on that to see if there's any possibility of the virtual meeting options being expanded anytime soon. So I'll let Jen handle that question.
The short answer is no. I've been talking to people for probably the last 6 months, trying to get them to get rid of this December 31 date and just extend things, either get rid of it forever or extend it through the end of June. And unfortunately, some of it got caught up in the NSBA letter that we're asking for virtual meetings so that boards can avoid their parents. But now that we're in the spot where people can't join virtually, and you have medically vulnerable board members, you have board members who may have COVID and it's very mild and you can still do your job, that you could participate, but you're in quarantine. So I wonder if the door may creak open a little bit. We had a meeting this morning with MASA about how to advance some of this, and a lot of it is going to come down to all of you. Your legislators need to know it's an issue. And I think that every time I come in, they're like, well, whatever. So they need to know it's an issue. If you have a board that struggles with the idea of having to have everybody in person for whatever the reason may be, let your legislator know that. And that it's not an avoidance of the public. It is a safety issue. And that you can talk to them too about the number of people that show up at your virtual meetings, because sometimes that is higher, many times, than you have in person, but they're not quite seeing that. So I highly recommend, we will keep talking on the ground, and we're actually setting up a meeting with our counterparts in city, county, and township governments to see if the 5 of us and probably the community colleges can all march forward on this. And if we all come forward and say, look, this is a problem, maybe we get movement, but it really is gonna help and possibly change some people's minds if they hear from all of you.
Thanks, Jen. Jan, you have your hand up.
I was just exactly going to say what Jen said in terms of this happened to us last week. I'm having surgery, and so I'm sort of immunocompromised at this point, and but I had to go to our board meeting. I just sat way back in the stacks of the library, but I communicated with both of our legislators, and one was very positive because we have a personal relationship in terms of trying to do something. The other one was not at all, but you know, I think that's the best thing to do at this point, is to communicate with your legislators who you probably already have a relationship with, hopefully. So.
It's good that Ed was nice to you.
Tried not to call out any names.
I only said which one was nice to you. I didn't call out the one that wasn't. Lauren, you have your hand up.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lauren McGee, and I'm a newly elected school board member in Highland Park, Michigan. As some of you may know, in Highland Park, we just emerged from emergency manager from our school district in April of 2018. So the majority of our board are new, and due to COVID, we haven't had a chance to have much training. And I know for instance, is still trying to understand my role as a school board member here in Highland Park. But the question I have is, I know charter schools, public school academies in Michigan are usually governed by a private appointed board of directors. But in Highland Park, we have a board of directors, but we also have a elected board of education. And some of the problems that we're having, I think the lines are getting blurred between the board of directors and the board of education. A lot of times, we as the board of education, we feel that we have no say so in what's going on. And I know, basically, I want to know, is that unusual to have a board of directors and also a board of education in a school district? Is that unusual? And are there any
Lauren,
classes
that's a good question. You're really one of what I would say, I mean, 2 districts in a very specific circumstance, Highland Park and Muskegon Heights, have a situation exactly like yours, where it's a local district that has a local charter school, where there's a local charter school board and the local board of education. We do have ISDs in the state that charter, and so their ISD board is the board. They appoint the board of the charter school or approve them. And so it's a little bit similar to your circumstances, but definitely probably not as closely related. So it does create a different dynamic that almost anybody experiences. And I did post earlier in the chat, and I think really to think about both of you mentioned training and whole board role, you know, what your role is as a board member. You just mentioned the difference between the charter school board and your board, and how do you deal with that? I posted Debbie Stair from our office, her email address, and you know, it might be something worth considering from your board's perspective, if you haven't already, to, you know, really talk about some whole board training, so that you don't have to all go to a conference or something else, but you know, something where we could come to you. And then secondly, we also have people, adjuncts and other staff that you know, might be able to facilitate how that relationship between the charter school board and your board can best serve the students in Highland Park. So it's not an easy one to answer and give you guidance today, but I think we have the resources to kind of help you out in the long term in that space.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Not a problem. Let's see. I'm looking to see if there are questions that. Yeah, Jen sent me a note. I was going to actually ask you, Jen, days and hours, 75%. I know people are always interested in hearing about that.
So this is one where it's going to take all of you to get some movement on this. We've even been told by staff in the appropriation chairman's office that there needs to be a tipping point. And I don't know what his tipping point is, but the conversation we're trying to have is getting some flexibility around days and hours. For those of you that are closing due to COVID, due to staffing shortages, which is a little bit different than your attendance, but due to copycat threats, due to weather or lack of weather. The deeper we get into winter, the more days you're going to need. And we know that there are districts that are already butting up their 6 snow days, and they haven't had a lot of snow yet. So we have been working on this since before the school year began to try to get flexibility on the count, because when the budget was passed in June, everything went back to pre-pandemic language, including attendance requirements and days and hours. So right now, you're required to have 75% of your students in attendance in order to count that day as a full day. If you fall below the 75%, there is a financial penalty that is prorated to dealing with the percentage that you are off that will be charged at the end of the school year, or you close and you have to make days up once you get past 6. So what we're trying to do is find some flexibility there so that if you have your doors open and as many kids as possible in those seats, it doesn't matter if you're 73%, 60%, 78%, you would still be able to count the day. We think that this would help a lot of districts who are making that choice in the morning. Do I take the financial hit or do I close for the day? And they have to pick the lesser of 2 evils. We're trying to take that away. But what we need from all of you is 2 things. There's a survey that went out, I think last week, it'll go out again this week, that is asking how many days have you closed so far. It's going out to board presidents. If you can make sure your board president fills that out for us, that would be really helpful. We're sending it to districts across the state from 3 or 4 different organizations, trying to get a good picture of what's going on that we can present to the legislature. But more importantly, we need you to call your House reps. The House is what's holding this up. A vehicle bill passed the Senate unanimously back in the fall. So the bill is sitting there it's in House Education right now, but the main stopping point is Representative Albert, who is the appropriations chair. We need to show that this is not just the school lobby asking to be able to go remote. Part of the feeling from the chairman is that we would use any flexibility to just kick the kids home and just be virtual, which does not at all reflect the reality of staff around the state. So we're trying to show that this 75%, it's law that is making you pick between the lesser of 2 evils. And so if we can get that out of the way, you could have your doors open, even if you only have 60% of your kids. The other thing that, other talking point is that, well, there's tons of money. Why does it matter if you're losing money? And the problem is this is money you've budgeted that you'll have to pay back at the end of the year. This isn't new money into the next budget. That's this year's money that's already budgeted, and you will have to pay the fine back. So we're working with all of our friends in education, trying to get some movement on this. But we had a meeting with the chairman's chief of staff last week, and his big thing was, it can't be the school lobby. It's got to be parents. It's got to be fellow caucus members. So that's where my ask to you comes in, to reach out to your representatives. And if you have a district that covers multiple reps seats, call them all. Let them know what your district is facing. Let them know the type of financial hit you may take or the days that you are missing. But that if you could get rid of that 75%, it would allow you to keep your doors open for the kids who are healthy and want to be in school. Schools are being punished for decisions of parents. And so that's the other thing we want to talk about too, is that this is parental choice. If parents don't want their kids in school because of COVID or threats or whatever the case may be, they can keep them home, but we can't do anything about it. We want to keep the doors open for those who want to be there. So to focus on the idea that we want kids in school, but that this 75% is what causes you in the morning to have to decide, do I close, do I go, and then take that financial hit at the end of the year. I don't have specific language for you to say this is the solution. There's a few solutions out there. One of the ones we've been talking about is to waive the 75%, but you could only waive the 75% if you have an in-person option for all students. And I know that's not ideal, but that's the sort of thing that plays into what Representative Albert's fears are. So it's kind of finding us some flexibility while giving him something he wants. So that's one of the ideas we're working on, but we really just need the information. We need them to know that this isn't something we're making up. And the deeper we get into winter, the more days we're going to lose. And those of you in tourism areas, this is a great time to reach out to your tourism bureaus to get them on your side. Because if you have to go to school well into June, they're not going to have any high schoolers to work in those various places. And the business community may be able to get through to Representative Albert better than the school community.
Thanks, Jen. John, I see you have a question.
Yeah, just really a comment, Don, to Jen's point. I think the other important part of this argument we need to make sure that we make is that whatever term you want to use, virtual instruction, online instruction, distance learning, whatever, it doesn't look like it did when the pandemic started. When we first started this, that March, going through the end of that year and then into this past school year, we've come a long way since then. Districts have learned a lot since then, technology-wise, training-wise. It just isn't what it was before, where we basically throw everybody online and wish them luck and try and work through it with them. We've come a long way, and I think we need to keep that in mind too.
Thanks for that, John. It's a good point to remind legislators of, because I think they hear stories from sometime months ago where a child wasn't able to access or wasn't high quality, and that's what they now continue to think of as what education is, and it's not the case, particularly depending on the district that you're in. Jen, Bob posted, and I can't remember off the top of my head, it seems like it does describe what the act of God days are in the statute. Is there a definition? Because I don't believe that, even though some are using it, I didn't believe that illness or threat really is covered in that space.
There's been a lot of talk about that threat is not. There are schools that have closed for, especially you saw it before Thanksgiving, for deep cleaning, but they called it mental health days. Those wouldn't be covered by this either. Part of it is what will MDE waive? And Brad, you may know better what exactly the statute says.
Yeah, I just looked it up. I'm going to go ahead and paste it. I'll paste it in the chat here in a second. Let's see if this works. I think I might have got most of it in there, but yeah, it doesn't cover threats and does cover illnesses. Essentially how it's laid out in the statute.
Yeah, and we were in a conversation last week with Dr. Rice in this very issue, in this very area. He said the Department of Ed will be, as you know, they can grant up to 3 additional days beyond the 6. They are, I think, going to be as helpful as possible. But he was looking very specifically at the definition as well, and saying, you know, as much as he understands, you know, mental health day for students and or teachers, he doesn't feel that he has the authority within the statute to count that or give a district permission in that space. So just be aware that that definition, you know, or that section does kind of spell things out, and be aware of how your district is approaching its use. And it's another one, like Jen said, if, you know, I think there's a lot of legislators out there that can see the logic of making some changes. The question really becomes whether you know, like as Jen mentioned, Representative Albert, really, like, you know, if those legislators can get some others to move forward and actually schedule a conversation and a committee hearing and vote on these things. And it is going to be about, you know, making those contacts. So
I actually sent it to Don directly the first time I posted it. Now I just posted it to everyone, so everyone should have it now.
Other questions, comments, thoughts? We're right almost up at 1 o'clock. Well, I want to take a moment and then let everybody go. But I did want to take a moment. I saw looking at the attendees here, and I was, didn't mention anything at the top of the hour, but I did see that Mary Hanser from the Oxford Board of Education is on today. And one, Mary, just say thank you for being on today and taking the time to listen, knowing that you have a ton of things going on in your district, and being on an MASB webinar may bring back a sense of normalcy, but I know that you have a lot of other heavy lifting to do within your community. And I speak on behalf, I think, of our board and everybody on this call and all of our membership, to say that, we continue to think of Oxford, and our hearts continue to go out in our prayers. And if there's a space that MASB can be helpful, or any of your friends and peers on local boards, avail yourself of that. None of us hope to ever see something like that happen in Michigan again, and don't ever wish that on a school district, but know that we're here to support you in any way that we can.
Thanks, John.
And
Thanks, everybody. OCSBA has been great, and I am reaching out, so thank you.
And with that, it is 1 o'clock. I want to thank everybody for being on today. As Brad and Jen and I all said, if you have other questions, contact us directly. We're happy to answer questions that are coming into your district, or things that you have about legal, legislative, or anything else. Avail yourselves of MASB. That's what we're here for. And, we will continue to do these webinars throughout the upcoming year, to do it as a group and be able to share with each other. And so have a great rest of your week, and I will see you all at the next upcoming event for MASB. Thank you.
Thank you to the MSB team. Thank you. Have a great day.